Before the Holocaust, before the world even defined the word genocide, Germany carried out a brutal campaign in Africa that nearly wiped out entire nations. This is the story they don't teach in most schools. It began in the deserts of Namibia, and it set a deadly precedent for the 20th century. This is the forgotten genocide. In 1884, during the Berlin Conference, European powers convened to divide Africa among themselves. For Germany, a relatively new empire on the world stage, it was an opportunity to assert global influence. One of its first territorial acquisitions was Southwest Africa, present-day Namibia. This region was already home to diverse indigenous communities, among them the Herero, Nama, Damara, and Ovambo. They lived in semi-nomadic societies, organized along kinship lines, with traditions of trade, pastoralism, and communal land management. German interests were largely economic. Settlers sought fertile land and mineral wealth, while colonial administrators aimed to establish order and control. In practice, this meant the appropriation of land, the introduction of foreign laws, and the undermining of indigenous authority structures. As settlers arrived, communal lands were fenced, and indigenous groups were pushed into wage labor. For many, this meant working in mines, on farms, or building railways under harsh conditions. Labor contracts, often signed under duress or deception, functioned like systems of bonded servitude. Punishments for desertion were severe. Families were separated. Traditional ways of life were rapidly eroded. The tension between colonizers and indigenous groups intensified throughout the 1890s. Disputes over land, cattle thefts, and unfair taxation added fuel to a growing resentment. In January 1904, under the leadership of Chief Samuel Maharero, the Herero people launched an uprising. It was targeted and strategic, aimed at symbols of colonial power, not at civilians. The German response, however, was swift and unrelenting. General Lothar von Trotha was dispatched to suppress the revolt. What followed marked one of the darkest chapters in German colonial history. On October 2, 1904, General von Trotha issued a written order stating, "The Herero people must leave the country. If they do not, I shall force them out with the great guns. Any Herero found within German borders will be shot." This order was not a military tactic, it was a policy of extermination. Over the following months, Herero families were driven into the Omaheke Desert. Wells were poisoned, and German patrols surrounded the area to prevent escape. Thousands died from dehydration and starvation. The legacies of the early 20th century endured. Land alienation, economic disparity, and deep social trauma. For most of the 20th century, the genocide was not officially acknowledged by Germany. Survivors and descendants of the Herero and Nama continued to press for recognition and reparations. In 2004, Germany formally recognized the atrocities as genocide in a symbolic act, and in 2021, the German government pledged $1.3 billion in development aid to Namibia, though it stopped short of calling it reparations. Today, the memory of these events lives on in ceremonies, oral histories, and legal claims. Descendants of those affected continue to preserve the cultural identities that colonialism sought to erase. For historians, the Namibian Genocide offers crucial lessons. It reveals the early intersections between colonialism, industrialized warfare, racial ideology, and human suffering. It forces us to reconsider what we define as genocide, and when we choose to remember. History is not just a record of what happened. It's a reflection of whose voices we choose to hear. At Native Historian, we're committed to amplifying those voices, the overlooked, the silenced, the resilient. If this story offered you insight, if it sparked thought or reflection, we invite you to help us continue this journey. Like this video, share it with others who seek a fuller understanding of history, and subscribe to Native Historian for more stories that matter. Because understanding the past is the first step toward shaping a better future. Stay curious.